Hello, and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be talking about Kurt Vonnegut, who, as you can see on the screen, was a World War II veteran, an American author, and a Hawkeye of the University of Iowa. These two images show Kurt Vonnegut. Now, the image on the right is more typical of what people picture when they hear Kurt Vonnegut. This was taken at the peak of his writing career. The mustache and curly hair are iconic, and as we'll later see, he used to draw caricatures of himself as personal signatures. Now, the image on the left is a picture of him when he was a private in the United States Army during World War II. Like many young men in the 1940s, Kurt Vonnegut was drafted and sent to Germany to fight against the Nazi forces. Now, his experience was a little different than many Americans because his unit was captured by Nazi forces. Once captured, he and his fellow soldiers were force marched several miles into the cold to a train. They were loaded onto the train with many other prisoners of war. He writes in several letters that there wasn't enough room for them to stand up. The floor was covered in cow dung. They had to take turns sleeping and standing. There was also no sanitary accommodations. Once the train was over, and this trip included several days over Christmas as well, the prisoners were transported to Dresden, Germany. Once in Dresden, the prisoners of war, like Vonnegut, were given forced hard labor every day. All they were given to eat was about a crust of bread and a cup of unseasoned potato soup. They remained in Dresden until the American and British forces showed up and firebombed it. Now, if you are having trouble picturing a firestorm, which is the result of a firebombing, think of a tornado. Now picture that tornado on fire. Now imagine what that on fire tornado would do to a city. And Vonnegut survived this as well. After the firebombing of Dresden, he and the other American soldiers that were still alive were put to work digging corpses out of the rubble and leading them to funeral pyres. Naturally, the German citizens of Dresden weren't too thrilled about the Americans being in the city, seeing as it was American and British forces that had bombed the city in the first place. So, as they did this grisly work, the citizens of Dresden would throw rocks at them and harass them. They stayed there until the end of the war, when they were officially repatriated and sent back to the United States. Of course, upon returning home, Vonnegut turned his life to the craft of writing. As I mentioned before, he is a Hawkeye. He taught at the University of Iowa as well as Harvard and the City College of New York. If you go downtown in Iowa City, you might see this plaque here. This, I believe, is shown right outside Van Allen Hall, and it reads a quote from one of his more famous books, Mother Night, which was about his time in World War II. It says, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." What do you guys think? Insta-worthy? Hashtag inspired? Hashtag good quotes? He wrote many books, not just the one quoted on the sidewalk outside of Van Allen Hall at the University of Iowa. If you look in the top left corner, you'll notice Slaughterhouse-Five, which is perhaps his most famous work. It details all of the events I described earlier about his time in Germany during World War II, but it has a lot of science fiction elements. The main character gets abducted by aliens. He time travels. It was truly a unique book that put Vonnegut on the map as a American fiction writer, and he's considered to be one of the fathers of modern science fiction. Now, here's a picture of him a little later in life. Given the widespread popularity of his books and the attention that they received, he himself received many invitations to speak at colleges and universities. And in 2006, a high school class, under the instruction of a teacher called Miss Lockwood, received an assignment to write to a living author and invite him or her to come to the Xavier High School and speak. Of all the students in the class, 6 of them chose to write to Kurt Vonnegut, and of all the authors who received letters, Vonnegut was the only one to write a reply. Here's the letter that Kurt Vonnegut wrote to Miss Lockwood's class. Now take a moment, and we're going to go ahead and read through it together. Dear Xavier High School, and Miss Lockwood, and Messrs. Perrin, McFreely, Batten, Maurer, and Conquista. I thank you for your friendly letters. You sure know how to cheer up a really old geezer, 84, in his sunset years. I don't make public appearances anymore because I now resemble nothing so much as an iguana. What I had to say to you, moreover, would not take long. To wit, practice any art. Music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly. Not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming. To find out what's inside you. To make your soul grow. Seriously, I mean starting right now. Do art and do it for the rest of your lives. Draw a funny or nice picture of Miss Lockwood and give it to her. Dance home after school and sing in the shower and on and on. Make a face in your mashed potatoes. Pretend you're Count Dracula. Here's an assignment for tonight, and I hope Miss Lockwood will flunk you if you don't do it. Write a 6-line poem about anything, but rhymed. No fair tennis without a net. Make it as good as you possibly can, but don't tell anybody what you're doing. Don't show it or recite it to anybody, not even your girlfriend or parents or whatever, or Miss Lockwood, okay? Tear it up into teeny weeny pieces and discard them into widely separated trash receptacles. You will find that you have already been gloriously rewarded for your poem. You have experienced becoming, learned a lot more about what's inside you, and you will have made your soul grow. God bless you all. Kurt Vonnegut. And in the bottom right corner, you can see the signature doodle that he later popularized in a lot of his personal correspondence. The mustache, the curly hair, the large nose, and then, of course, the name Kurt in the middle. So now we're going to come to today's assignment. In your journals, write down a response to this question of agree or disagree. The statement is, creating art is an important thing to do, even if you don't make money and don't become famous. Once you're completed with this journal, go ahead and type up a summary of it and be sure to submit it to the classroom Dropbox. That being said, we're not entirely off the hook. We're going to go ahead and take his advice on this thing. We're going to see if it is important to create art for the sake of creating art. So what you'll see on the screen is a poem that I put together of 6 lines and rhymed. And this is an example of a very simple rhyme scheme. A, B, B, C, C, as we discussed last week. You don't necessarily need to follow this rhyme scheme. In fact, as long as it rhymes somewhere, it should be good to go. Good enough for Vonnegut, at least. You'll need a scratch piece of paper and a writing utensil in order to write down your poem. Now remember, make it as good as you possibly can. Don't show it to anybody. And when you're finished, tear it up. I'm serious. Tear it up into teeny weeny pieces and discard them into widely separated trash receptacles. Or one should probably be good enough. Once you've completed that, I want you guys to revisit your journals and go ahead and write down whether or not your opinion changed and give a few thoughts about why you think that this was an assignment that was important to do, or if you thought it was a waste of time. I want to hear both. And both of these written responses, your initial impression and your journal response after taking this assignment down, are going to be reviewed and graded. So, thank you guys for taking time to learn a little bit about Kurt Vonnegut and to move into today's lesson. I'm looking forward to reading your responses. Remember, submit only your journal entries and definitely do not submit your poem. That being said, I will see you guys next week, and until then, keep reading.